Trying to talk about Kyrie
We
Irving.
are live. You said talk about what? So we are
The
back.
the
This
Brooklyn
is
the Brooklyn the Brooklyn Nets player.
the Akoski. Oh, episode 71, Lyrical Ones podcast. Brought to you by the good folks of Lyrical Opposition. I am Cineo, joined as always by my fellow host, Alfluent. How are you doing, Alfluent?
I'm affluent. I'm well. It's a rainy Wednesday in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's gloomy, and I'm okay with that. It's gloomy, and I think I'm in a space of contemplation and reflection, and learning not to think move too fast or too slow uh, with my response and reaction to what's happening in the world. It's it's one of those things where kind of gotta sit back and listen to all the sides and then process my own initial thoughts and how authentic they are, uh, and then how kind they may or may not be. Um, yes, it's an interesting time in the world, so I'm doing well, and I think I'm always grateful to reflect and you know uh, just have the time to, because the time we don't get back. As time is the finite resource of ours. You know, time allows us to recover and regenerate. So I'm grateful for the time. Happy to be here. How you feeling today? How you doing? How you living?
I am. I'm doing good. I'm doing great. Uh, Appreciative as always. The appreciation really helps to amplify what I'm looking at, what I'm experiencing, what I'm hearing. I say that because there's challenges as always. There's going to be adversity for some, not for all. I will admit some, they'll just they'll be able to coast. They'll be able to sail and not have one challenge, hurdle, or obstacle. But for those that do, maybe you can appreciate um the simplest things. I've been giving my form of ignorance. I've been stepping up and sharing my unsolicited content since last week. I've been developing it, refining the practice and the process. And one thing that I was saying was about consistency and how easy it is to take for granted. The consistency in breathing, the consistency in waking up, the consistency in your heartbeat. These three factors will happen, right? Now, we may struggle with them, but how mindful and how we engage them, how proactive we are in the practice and refinement of those consistent forms that we rely on, they're necessary to our being. They are complete and they are whole in what they do. Yet it is so easy to overlook and not even think about it until it's too late. And I gain appreciation by having that as a source of grounding. Because yeah, there's things going on at all times in the world, and it's easy to get wrapped up in how you feel. Oftentimes, y'all see me get little spicy, get my little cayenne pepper on the podcast from time to time. And as we do our best to maintain this space for healing and for rejuvenation and for rest, it's important to think about how do we engage with those challenges, and appreciation has been paramount because I definitely appreciate breathing. I definitely appreciate my heartbeat. I definitely appreciate sleeping when I can get it. Um, and I'm just been, doing my best to give my appreciation in a multitude of ways. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm doing right now. So you said you want to talk about the Koski, the Brooklyn Nets. What's going on with the Koski? You just got muted. What happened? Outfluent. What? They muted you?
They basically are the Akatsuki. The way they operating. Um, you can't say outright that the the estranged point guard is is rocking the Itachi his Itachi form right now, but he is very philanthropic in his approach, and I think the people who are showing support um, are trying to ride his coattails. The celebrities who are not in the sport and in the arena who are supporting him, trying to be relevant, because if they were paying attention to his message, I think they would be trying to help the people who he's speaking on behalf of. He's trying to bring attention to the situation of citizens around the world who who are choosing to kind of not be bullied or pushed around by the government and their peers, and kind of the negative view of their actions or their resistance to um, this pressure from society. And it's wild because like you take the side effect profile of certain certain medical procedures, and they seem dangerous at times for some people. And right, for some people say, well, I can afford the risk, and others who feel like they can't afford the risk, and that should be enough, right? That should be enough for someone to maintain their title and their company, to maintain their role um, amongst their team, main, maintain and keep their job or career, um, and their standing as a decent human being. But like folks, I was talking to a client earlier this week, and they said they had strong feelings about certain things, right? And it's like, oh, I'm in this position where like I'm gonna just listen, and really try to kind of pull all the information out, gather more information instead of offer up any. Um, I like for people to feel heard, even if they're not in, the position or had a skill set to do the same. For me, um, and I think it's just interesting that people could just like really swerve all the way off the cliff and be all right with it and say, okay, this person is basically a criminal. They said it was the same. They said it was the same thing as watching, as a group of people watching someone attack a person. They seeing harm done and choosing to do nothing about it. And I thought, oh man, I'm glad I got this podcast because I ain't got to talk about it with this person who's like this way in their sight, in their mindset. And it's really like if I choose to protect myself from things I don't know about, right? And I choose to protect myself from the flu that I'm, may be familiar with to some extent, or at least, the medical industry may be familiar with. Um, you say, why am I paying for any of this stuff if I ain't got to pay for this new thing? Why do I got to pay for this old stuff that they know everything about, got all the research and got and it's easy to produce, why I gotta pay for insulin? Why I gotta pay for the flu? Why I gotta pay for all these other things that I need to travel? Why it's gotta come out of my pocket when they can fund this just like that when it's an emergency? But it's a I wonder how long it's gonna stay free. Uh, and I wonder if we're gonna compare notes on what freedom means to people now, and before, this generation, people who lived before us. Are we gonna continue to compare notes on freedom and sovereignty and liberty and justice, or is it just all gonna be um, very objective? Are we gonna take relative looks at things and say, oh, well, this is what freedom is doing now, and right, like freedom doesn't need to do this later, right? It's like freedom doesn't need to provide this for you where we are right now because of technology, because of whatever people's like standpoint or the way people are able to follow a perspective or follow a mindset just because it's loud and it's repetitive and you know it's all over social media, it's all throughout society to the point where people can relate, you know, being a bystander as someone attacks a person, to refusing to be bullied into, you know, a, a procedure that may not be right for you.
See, I had to let you just go because as soon as you started, and I was like, man, whew, yeah, this highlights a lot of things. Um, I Generalizations suck, but they're kind of cool. So in this generalization, there are some of us who just don't care enough, right? When I hear this situation, I, I'm a compassionate person. I'm the person that can see both sides of an argument, right? Because I've accepted that perception is reality, and everyone has a different perception. So there's multiple realities at play. And for some of us, like I think of the word trust. I think of what trust means, right? To have the ability to have faith in something, someone, right? And how much faith is there then be can turn the tide on what it is that you will end up doing, right, with someone or something. Now, in this current form in time, I would joke around, but it ain't a joke. It's not a joke. Um, because when I went through the process of getting a vaccine, people was like, "Oh, I'm surprised you did it. I'm surprised you was so, you was just you was able to." And I was like, "Well, this is the thing. This is the caveat. They don't want the smoke." And I'm not saying it as a threat. I'm saying it as a person who, since a child, has seen the world differently than my peers, than my family, than those closest to me. And people would oftentimes highlight that, right? Like like the way you see it, like I believe in it. I could get behind it. I trust it. I believe in you. I have faith in what you bring to the table. And that's because I'm a very loving person. I wear my heart on my head. When I walk in the room, you know that my heart is leading first, right? And through my heart, then I'm able to decipher and to see the reality around me, the truth, the depth, the layers. I've been a person that people have turned to. I've been a person that people have confided in. I've been a person who stepped up and advocated for others. I will continue to be that. That's just who I am. I'm a person who's humble enough to not subject myself to the beauty standards of the time to be a talking head in the way that we've known, right? I'm a rapper, yes, but this mask has as a filter, right? So it's easy to scoff at, right? Because if you don't have the patience, the tolerance, or the capacity to even look past the mask, then you're just gonna get consumed with whatever I look like. So it is what it is at the end of the day, right? We have this man who has stature, who has status, who's been able to navigate the world as a black man in the United States and have a voice because of his skill set, right? It's entertainment, but like I said, right, this gives us that fix to have a, a healthy war, right? Competition, competitive, right? The goal to be the victor, and he's communicating his position, and people, as as you're witnessing, right? They have a very passionate view on, well, this person's harmful, which is funny because it highlights another black man who people are seeing as harmful based off of what he's saying. And the thing is, I don't see them as um, you know, isolated things from each other. I see them as related because in one camp, a man is saying something people says is harmful, but we don't look at why is this man saying it. We just look at the fact that he said, right? I said, don't
Right.
judge the fruit for what happened in the roots, right? He is the product of years of different situations, circumstances, and events that he's had to live through, and I've had to live through. And we've just decided to make different choices because on my end, the place that I sit in is I know there's enough of us who are skeptical and went ahead and did it. I know there's enough of us who are skeptical and aren't going to do it. And I have no issue
Right.
to unify and bring people together under those banners for any injustice that's done to me and the people that I care about. I have no issue with challenging the world around me and the systems that I've chosen to trust or the systems that I'm still skeptical of, but trusted enough to go ahead and make this decision to say, give me the shot. I have no issue because I'm not going to do it in a way that's going to be harmful. I'm going to do it in a way that is protective. I'm going to do it in a way that is me seeking some form of justice for the compassion that I have for the people who've been harmed. So, yes, they don't want this, right? Because as I sit here, I've made decisions, multiple decisions, to put myself in a position where I navigate the world to my design, which means, yes, I haven't put myself out there, but I would forever put myself out there if I knew there was a lot of people being harmed, including myself, because we all decided we were going to make a choice to try and do the right thing and it turned out to blow up in our face. Let me be the one.
Right.
Because as a tacticianer, as a planner, as a strategist, as an organizer, as a leader, as an advocate, I'm more than happy to turn up and switch in a whole different direction. Because right now, yes, I'm feeding the train with a little bit of coal, but it is nothing for me to go and make more coal and get the train to move a little faster. Just off of the strength that, yes, I am motivated by others. That's just who I am. Right. So in this case, I say that with certainty, with confidence, with conviction, because I know it's true. Others know it's true who know me, right? I'm not turning up for a purpose because I believe in a certain level of balance. And when things are in an imbalance, I have no problem going full force, right? That's the thing that I hope people understand in my position that I sit in, because I'm not saying this with malintentions, but I do understand the cost. I do understand the risk. I totally understand. And if it's people being harmed, I'm more than willing to incur the risk. I'm more than willing to pay the cost. Right now, the price that I'm willing to pay is one of balance because there's no harm being done. There is the potential for harm. There is the idea that there's something that could come because we don't know yet, right? We oftentimes live in the anxiety of what's to come. Of I don't trust it. I don't believe in it because of XYZ factors, my trauma, trauma of others, the things that I've witnessed. I don't I don't hold that to be true. And then we look at the correlative data, right? Because there is something to be said about being healthy. There's something to be said about what it means to have a healthy body, right? Have a healthy environment, to have a healthy habit, healthy relationship with yourself, your community, the food you eat,
Right.
the habits that you take part in every day. So when a person is now saying, well, based off of the information that's given to me, this is what I feel comfortable doing, and I'm witnessing a world where we're not providing space for people, we're actually saying, no, you need to actually join us in doing the same action. When, to be very clear about it, right? It's not a cure, it's not an end all be all, right? There have been breakthrough cases, there have been people who've experienced a severity of symptoms. It definitely
Right.
helps, right? I'm not saying that it doesn't help. It does help because that's what it's made to do. It's made to help you as an individual, right? And the thing that most sucks about it is all the mixed messaging that's gone on from everyone, right? For those that are for it, for those that are against it. Because what happens is we get lost in the sauce of understanding, right? We don't understand each other. We look at each other as adversaries when we decide I want to do something different, instead of saying, how can I support you and give you space to do that different? Right? We're not
Right.
saying, as I've said many times, we're not creating or encouraging an environment where science is more readily available in school, or that our relationship to the healthcare system starts at an earlier point in time so we can have more, acclimated, more accredited, or more educated people join in the field of healthcare. Now, we ain't doing that. We ain't trying to make the society have better access to healthcare, because that's not what this is. What this is it's us saying, no, 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 we got a quick fix. We have a stopgap, right? It's not perfect, but it works. And we want you all to do it, right? Not that we need to change society, not that we need to change the way we've been doing it, because guess what? If you change the way you do it, you'd have less people who are now saying, I don't want to do it because I don't trust what's in front of me. Because you have more familiarity, more
Yeah.
education, more awareness. Well, you have more buy in because you have a different relationship, a different dynamic. Because I know people who, because of what they've been through, they're less likely to want to do what it is that you're asking them to do. And we're not creating a society that can hold the capacity, because that's again why we're doing it, right? It's like the biggest problem was to treat it, we didn't have the capacity to treat the people. We ran out of capacity, we ran out of room. They said people were dying and we don't have beds. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the people or the force or the power to take on this wave of people who are sick, right? That's what was being communicated. That's what we're sitting with. And if you want to isolate it and compartmentalize the parts that you think matter most, well, I hate to say it, but you're a part of the problem, right? Because you can do that when it comes to me being a black person, to me being a Latin person, to me being a man, to being a woman, to being trans, to being anything. You can compartmentalize whatever I am based off of the argument and the preference of what you feel comfortable with when you dissect the pieces that you think matter. But when reality hits, we have to look at it all, because if we don't take it all in and really decipher, well, how much of this do we hold on to? Because when you tell me there's 80 million people, 80 million people who aren't doing it, there's 80 million people who not going to do it. To me, that sounds like we have room for concern to think about 80 million people and how we're a part of those people. We're
Right.
in a
Or room for
community with those
compromise.
people. Yeah. I
Right.
mean,
It's
I was
like
just saying.
if, if I'm if the goal, right, is to lessen the burden on the hospitals, right, and keep people from dying, right, we have achieved that, right, in certain locales, right, certain cities, right, certain states, right, we've achieved that. So right, so at a certain percentage of you know people who have done it, right, they have now essentially prevented their city from being overrun, or their city, the local hospitals from being overrun, just because we know they won't, they likely won't experience severe reactions, right? Severe symptoms. They likely won't, what experience, right? Anything that will put them in a hospital. And so if you've done that, right, and then isolated the folks or by preventing them from entering, public buildings, of certain buildings, and then given permission, say, just in San Francisco, right? Folks now don't have to wear masks in most places, in San Francisco, you know, if they've gone ahead and, you know, joined in the process. And right, everything should be cool then for everyone else who's staying out of the space, right? Everything should be cool, right? That it doesn't necessarily mean you can lift. Basically, you can lift, you know, the mandate for a lot of folks, right? Just because once you reach this percentage of folks who have now been vaccinated, everybody else who needs jobs, right, can come back to work, you know, and not be a threat to at least the people who are vaccinated. And the people who are vaccinated, right, should not be, right, in a position to, be hospitalized. While, while a breakthrough case, right, can then be, passed on to someone who's unvaccinated. And then, right, you got that whole situation. But according to the numbers, right, it won't necessarily, cause much trouble outside of the singular incident. And so it's kind of wild that if you say take a basketball team, you say, well, everybody on the team except this one person, right, is vaccinated. So, and everybody they play with, right, is going to be vaccinated. And then their family may or may not be vaccinated. But if they're testing and saying, right, they're producing negative tests, and then all the training staff and the media are all vaccinated, this one person should not be a threat to anybody to, receive a breakthrough case or whatever and be hospitalized. They should all be good if the science is working that way, right? If the science is not working that way, and it's, there are problems, right, and there's more danger, right, they should, be able to express that danger and, the potential threat, and continue to, develop, what needs to be developed. I just think it's wild because the folks who have the strongest feelings are folks who are in, position of, you know, power, or are living a little bit more comfortably, who are in the middle of the upper class, where, right, they can afford to be bothered
I
by
mean, they,
someone who is, likely, right, who is
I love
likely,
your choice of words.
in
You said they can
more
afford
a
to be
tougher position.
bothered. They can afford to be bothered, is what you said. Like
Yeah,
they're in a position where they can afford to be bothered. People think about that. Can you afford to be bothered by someone else's choices? Right? Because this is another thing that this highlights. This time period was like the first that I can recall in my lifetime or in known history where we had a collective, like there was a collective adverse moment. It was like what I can't recall since what, like World War II, right? We as a world had a collective adverse situation we were experiencing. We were all experiencing adversity because what a younger
Right.
me used to do is I used to get jealous of people who I would talk to and have conversations about their life and realize how much they did not have adversity. I used to look at them in like a like awe, like a wonder of like,
Right.
oh, you've never lost a family member as a child? Like you've never lost someone you loved? You never had to go without like food? Oh, you never had cereal in a bag, not because the bag was in a box, but because you went to the store and bought it and it just came in a bag. Or you know what it means, right, to always have, right? I would look in awe because the more we would talk, the more I realized their comprehension of adversity was different. You know how many times that I would tell them or my friends would tell someone about a story of their life or what they've been through and they'd be like, that's not real. Is that really real? Is that true? And the story was depressing.
They
The
still
story
they
was sad, right?
they still living that way.
They still living with whatever they was going through. They're still working through whatever they was going through, right? And the thing is, right, when you said that, when you said those words, because I was looking up, like I was trying to see, like as you were talking about, like who are the most vaccinated, right? Who are the least vaccinated, right? And we start seeing the income associated, right, with how much money you make. And you start to see the ones that kind of can afford, right? They also are the ones that are most likely to be vaccinated, right? But what does that mean, right? The roots create the fruit. How healthy the roots do will then also
Right.
let you know what the harvest is, right? And so when you're sitting there reaping the harvest and the benefits of the nutrients that you've been able to seep into your roots and you've been able to have access to sun and water, right? When you've been able to grow up in a climate where your fruits are ripe, of course, you're going to be more likely to receive other resources and things. But when you've grown in conditions where you're barely getting by, right? Then it's going to look a little different. It's going to be different. And that's the thing that I'm trying to bridge the gap on by having this conversation, right? Is that there is a level of understanding that we don't have. There's a level of compassion that doesn't really exist. They've sold
Right.
you a lie and you've invested in it, and now for some it's very hard to break away from. And what I'm suggesting and what I'm introducing is this is the thing that I see often. There is this fear of being wrong, right? Like your existence is dependent upon how right you are. I say that in
Right.
reference to someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is this figurehead, right? He's a black man from the United States who's an astrophysicist, I believe. And oftentimes, when he's asked certain questions, he becomes very defensive. He's always laughing, forced laughing at times to make, in my mind, right, in my psychosis, my trauma, my processes, he's trying to make other people feel comfortable with him being in the space because I don't know why he laughs as much as he does, but he laughs a lot. And that's not a knock against him. It's just an observation of a
Mhm.
black man who's an astrophysicist who's probably had to navigate a lot of different situations, scenarios where he was probably the only black man there, right? So when I see this, there's certain things that I see in him that resonate with me, and there's certain things he says that I just can't resonate with at all, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because he is a representation of science. But the level of conviction he starts to display, the way that his energy and his mood changes, is something that I see shared with a lot of people when it comes to when you're questioning them about something, right? When you start to question them and you start to
Yeah.
probe and you start to ask them, they get into a defensive mindset instead of, well, why am I even becoming defensive, right? Because whatever is the truth is
Right.
the truth. I don't have to be defensive over the truth. The truth will always be what it is. And it's not for me to protect because I'm who is any of us to be the representative of truth, right? We can only do so much. I know teachers who fail at their job. They're not giving truth. They're not giving facts or answers. They're just having kids pushed along in the system, right? Now he's become the talking head because yes, he's he's accepted, right? And so when I think of how people can mirror his same behaviors, his same kind of tone, energy, even emotion. And I think about truth and I think about honesty and I think about people sharing their perspective and how we can become very divisive and say, no, that ain't it. No, I don't believe in that. Nah, that isn't true.
Right.
We have trouble accepting someone else's perspective because perception is reality, right? Just because the sky is blue to you does not mean it's blue for everyone. Some people can't see color. That's difficult for some of us to wrap our mind around, but why does that
Yeah.
mean we can't be compassionate towards them for the fact that they don't have that ability, right? And I see it like that. I don't like I've worked in the community and people often say, "Oh man, how are you able to do what you do?" Because that's what I lead with. I lead with a level of compassion that is far beyond your education that you've been given out of school. That's something that a teacher, that's something that
Right.
was instilled for me from my mother, right? Where you're going into a world and she knows my black child is going to go in a world where people are not going to like him just because of how he looks. They just not going to like him, right? And there's only so much I can do as a parent and a guardian as I send him out into the world
Right.
to prepare him. So, one of the things I'm going to do to prepare him is give him compassion and understanding and challenge him in his thought processes as he grows. So, when he goes into the community that he lives in, he knows how to navigate. Because as I grow up and I develop and refine those tools, and then I'm at service to my community to provide them with opportunities and resources, they're more likely to take to me than someone else. That I'm able to produce and create
Yeah.
success on the metric and the scale of measurement that has been created by someone else that ain't got nothing to do with me. So I can continue to navigate these processes to provide them with opportunities and resources. So I can give them either the morale boost that they need, the knowledge that they need, or whatever the case may be. Because in my mind, yeah, as well as the compassion, there was a level of confidence where I was always told you could do whatever you want. And because of that, when I do something, I don't have a difficulty learning. The difficulty isn't in the learning, the difficulty is in the access to whatever the tools are or the skills are. That's the difficulty,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Because I'm
That's where the
able to
challenge comes
take
from.
what I'm
Access.
learning and give it to someone else because I make sure it's accessible. Oh, we're talking about accessibility. Then we introduce the idea of disability. We introduce the concept of what that means for people's health. We introduce the concept of what that means to grow in a world where we don't give access to the disabled, let alone the abled, right? Because it's on a tiered system. Oh, but they don't want to get the shot. So they're acting out in violence. They're harming the community. If all that's going to happen is they're harming themselves, because that's the reality. They're harming themselves. If what's going to happen is going to happen to them, because again, I mean, I've heard of breakthrough cases. I've heard of cases where it was given from one vaccinated person to another. And if that's the reality, that's the information that I've received. Excuse me for not citing my sources. But if that's the information that I'm
Mm.
being given, right? Well, then the person that's choosing not to do it, I'm just afraid for them, but I'm going to be there for them. I'm not going to judge them, right? I'm not going to let my fear intervene in how I care for them, right? I'm going to try and create a space for them. I'm going to try to give them space to explore and figure out what do they need to do in case harm comes their way. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to harm them and then project my insecurities, my fears, my reservations on them because I don't know what they've been through. I don't know what they've experienced in life that has prevented them from making the choice that I made. Because, yes, the choice I made was not based off of the global community, right? It was not based off of this grand scheme of trying to go back to
Right.
normal. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I absolutely loved being away from the world. I enjoyed it. I
Mm.
had so much to do. I was able to create so much. I mean, I was thriving. So it's not about getting back to normalcy. I only did it to grant me access, full circle,
Right.
accessibility. I knew this was going to be a tool or a ticket or a means to get into the door. And yes, I was like, you know what? Let me just get out of this way because I got things I need to do. It was nothing about my fellow person because guess what? I stayed remote. I stayed indoors. I still stay double masked. I'm not the type of person that's going to risk it for the biscuit in that way. But you tell me this is going to grant me access, you're not going to keep me out this room. And if me getting in this room means you're going to put me in harm's way, well, now we're changing the narrative and the conversation of me being the rapper who has gold teeth to me being the activist who's going to organize and strategically deteriorate every level of what this structure is. Because again, there's a cost.
And right. And the cost is worth it often, right? If it gains you, if you gain access, right? Access that allows you to then provide access to others, right? Because like in service, right, you're trying to, provide access, through your compassion, which is driving you forward, right? Which would motivate you um, to see people have access. For me, it's very very similar in that aspect that people don't know what they have access to till they have a guide, right, and says, right, this is all that's available to you, in your approach, in your psyche, in your resources, in your movement, in your recovery, in your nutrition, right? This is you have access to this, um, and then helping them, figure out what to do with that access. And often I see just there are not enough programs, not just in my field, but I mean, just we had the government had 18 months, a year, 2 year, almost 2 years, right, to provide more access to the things folks needed. Instead, they made up something new to give them access to one thing and then deny access of something else. Um, it's kind of wild that that's where the division, right, and the disconnect comes from. Then within community, just among friends and family, and say, well, you don't want access, and if you don't want access, then you can't have access to us. You can't have access to this community. Can't have access, to conveniences. If you choose to, neglect your access, you know, to something that may or may not harm you. And we're at a space where you say, well, the access that you want me to take advantage of, you know, gives me is a certain amount of risk, and because you taking it doesn't mean that I should take that same risk. And I think we haven't seen this type of you know alienation or um, posturing, right, against people who are unwilling to take risks, for their health. Um, right, because like you said, right, we've had different global you know catastrophes and events where folks is on the same page, right? This is the best thing for us. And now maybe, right, there's too much misinformation. Maybe there's too many strong voices saying too many different things, right? It's too much money being circulated, right, to make some of these things happen. And also just like people don't know where to turn for truth, And so they, the folks who found, truth within, moving one way or the other for, for their well-being. And, one of the former NBA players, right, was saying, you don't go through the procedure for yourself. You go through the procedure for other folks. But if those folks have gone through the procedure, then they good.
I
I don't
mean,
I don't need to look after them.
when see, that's the thing, right? I remember that, and then I look at what is being said to me, right? And the point is, right, the the way that the vaccine I just looked it up on CDC, right? And it's talking about how it reduces the impact for the individual who's vaccinated, right? It's still possible to give it to others. They're saying at a reduced rate. How much, I don't know, because I didn't see the data, but that's what's being said, right? But what it really means is if you took it, it's a safety for you, right? Because if you're doing it for someone else, that implies that it ends with you when we now know it doesn't, right? You can go to the CDC website and it'll tell you, this has substantially reduced the burden of disease in the United States by preventing serious illness in fully vaccinated people and interrupting chains of transmission, right? And it says vaccinated people can still become infected and have the potential to spread the virus to others, although at much lower rates than unvaccinated people, right? And there when you think about it, if this is to prevent the symptoms from being severe for the person who's vaccinated, that makes sense, right? That's what it's saying. It's a safety belt, right? If you driving, someone wants to drive reckless, hopefully the seatbelt's going to work for you, right? And if they're not with a seatbelt, well, there's factors that will determine their chances, right? It's a game of risk. It's a gamble, right? And when you said that, right, with this person is using their status, this ex NBA player is using their stature to get others to engage in a system that not everybody is comfortable engaging in, right? That's the root of it.
Right,
Because when I look at this article on Axios about who hasn't gotten it the most, and it's based off of the, census data, it's saying that the people with lower incomes under $50,000 a year, that is majority of the people who haven't gotten vaccinated. And I look at the article and they're saying, oh, maybe it's because they don't have
mm,
enough time. Maybe it's because they work so much that they can't take a break. I mean, I haven't read the whole article, but to me, the first thing that comes to mind is they probably don't have a relationship to healthcare in general. Because when I wasn't making barely any money, my relationship with healthcare was almost non-existent. One, based off of the previous historical family trauma that I've seen with the healthcare system, and then two, I just didn't have time. It wasn't on the
right,
focal point, right? I can't tell you how many times I've had to sit with people who've going through healthcare systems and telling them how they should advocate for themselves because they're not getting treated the way they need to get treated. But that this article doesn't lead with that. That's not what we're seeing first, right? We're seeing, oh, they don't have enough time. You're speculating because you're speaking from a perspective and a position where you have no reference point. You have no
right,
experience. I'm
right,
speaking from experience as a person who's had to, as they say, grab myself by the bootstraps when in reality, my mama got me the boots. So I had the fortune, the benefit, the privilege to have enough to get me to the next step, to be in this position now where it's like, okay, you know what? And that's not a judgment to scoff at and just associate everything to a dollar sign, because as we see, a
right,
former NBA player who's made very well for himself has opted to, and we see another NBA player who's currently playing who's opted not to.
right,
It's your experience, it's your relationship, it's what you've been through. And I'm hoping that through compassion, we can gain a level of understanding to create space for both, right? I've seen people in my own life who've been so hesitant and resistant, but they've been able to have a conversation with me about what it means to be vaccinated. Whereas other people who will reference the same person be like, yeah, nah, they ain't gonna do it. They don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to hear it. And I'm like, oh, they come to me though. We talked about it. We had a
Mm.
conversation. I even opened the door up for them to be able to have a conversation with other people about it. Hmm. I wonder how that happened. Maybe because I'm not a person who's going to be judgmental enough to start to exude and expel people out of the community for their choice. Because when we get to the root of the problem, we start to see they're doing this based off of other things that have happened, not because of what's going on right now, not because of 2020, but because of the 20 years they've been living, the 30 years they've been living, the history of trauma that they've experienced. Like it's not far-fetched. And I'm not saying
Right.
this as a judgment for people to be like, oh, maybe you should be more lovey-dovey and hold and hug trees and hold hands. No, what I'm saying is if you take the time, you'll find out why. Because right now you're projecting why without knowing why. And that's wrong. You're giving your judgment when there's no need for judgment because chances are um, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Yeah.
And me being sweet, me being soft, right? Well, that just so happens to open up the door for people to one, if they need to fall, they know where to fall. And if they know what they need to take in, well, I can definitely find what it is that they need, right? What is the nutrients for the soul, right? And I'm just saying, like we're sitting in a position right now where we could do a lot of good, but more than enough in my horrible generalization, I'm seeing more than enough shame, blame, guilt, and wrong. As I was referencing earlier, another black man who said some things, the things that he was saying was to highlight, as I referenced earlier about being a child and having to have compassion, is that there's people in this world who just based off of how they look, other people will just not like them. They just won't. And as much as we try and we fight and we try and get what's ours, we could get justice and we could get rights and we could have equality in terms of treatment, but we cannot change how people feel, right? There's going to be people who are going to be raised and trained to just hate us for how we look as people. It don't matter if you're black or white or
Right.
Latin or East Asian or Southeast Asian, whatever the case may be, there's going to be someone who's not going to like you
Right. It's
just
groups of
because of how
people
you
all
look,
over.
right?
Right.
And
Yep.
the thing is that I don't have to necessarily like you, but I can accept you. I don't have to allow you into my space. But if we're outside, I'm not going to infringe and cause harm and get in your way. I'm going to respect you enough to just let you be you as you let me be me. Now, that's a difficult thing for people to process because for some strange reason, people aren't really understanding that. But in the context of the situation where someone's making a choice based off of their health care, I, I mean, I'd be remiss if we don't do the same for those who are opting to do differently. Because I'm not one to force, I'm not one to push. I've often found that the best change comes when you're just being compassionate. It's almost as though you can lead them to something more. It's almost as
Right.
though compassion and compass have a lot in common.
Yeah. They compassion can often lead to more compassion, and it can be a cycle that benefits people. It can be a a method for understanding. It can be a method for healing. Compassion can be a a medium almost for growth and equity. It's like if you want to include compassion into the conversation, right? Then it can be a conversation, and and people don't have to retreat or shut down, or see themselves as a op, or see the people around them as opponents. Compassion can let someone know that they're uh, that they're rooted for, that they have people behind them, that they're supported, and that compassion, right, can lead to a revelations almost that, oh, you are experiencing something different than me within the same geography, within the same city, within the same company. You are experiencing something different, and your experience and the way it varies from mine has contributed to your decision, and it's also contributed to your priorities. And so with compassion, I can look at your priorities and say, my priorities are different, but you are not necessarily wrong for your priorities, because my different priorities also came from my experience, my lived experience. And because I haven't had to, go through, some of the experience some of the needs um, lacking in my life, I was able to, right, see a route that, worked for me. And now that I can see your needs, at least, and acknowledge your needs, I can say, oh, well, you're just doing this out of your needs. Your needs to feel safe, your needs to feel, you know, belonging, your needs to feel cared for and supported. Because of those needs, you've, chosen to, opt out. And right, another basketball player, right, who's choosing to basically opt out of, participating, in this season, right, is now, going through a tough time because the relationship that he has with the organization, right, has shaped his priorities to where his needs, can no longer be met, you know, with the organization, the team, the job he has. His needs are superseding, his participation um, and commitment to his teammates. Says, and that happens, all over the world. And if you put it on a screen or you put it, on a news feed or a podcast, for whatever reason, when a person is not in front of them, it makes it challenging to find the compassion for that person. And that's probably the biggest microcosm, the biggest cause and effect of us communicating digitally, right? It's like, oh, I don't need compassion to weigh in on this. I don't even need to go there. I don't need to approach this conversation with my heart. I don't need to approach this situation with any kind of grace or understanding. it's wild. I'm watching this new anime, and you know he's a assassin reincarnated. So it's his second life, and he's got all his memories. So it's basically like restarting the game at a level 100, and he still got stuff to learn. He approached he approached his previous life, understanding that he was a tool, believing that he was just a tool for whoever hired him. And then in this next life, you know, 5, 6, 7 years in, as a child, um, right, he learns that assassins are not tools, right? They're people, and because they're people, they need to experience humanity so that they can discern, you know, what is right and what is wrong about their job. And in this age where we are interacting with folks, in a digital way, right? Just sometimes in conversation, we choose to not think about the human experience of another person when we have these exchanges. We look through a scope and a window in a moment of a photo or a red carpet event or a press conference or a post game interview or a season, and we say this person is this only in the window that I'm viewing them in, and within that I'm going to leave out the rest of their humanity to share my perspective. And I think we do it in our communities too. Just when we're trying to communicate, time and place to meet, we remove the humanity, sometimes unintentionally, just in our communication, right? To say, oh, well, I'm not thinking about what this person's human experience is like just to meet at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 6:30, 2 o'clock, 12:30. I'm just saying, does it work for me and my experience, and not what is everything that they're going through as a human to even provide an answer for me or a response. And I think, just we to execute, you know, more efficiently, we have to remember that we're people. And, the people that we're interacting with and exchanging with are also having a human experience, you know, worth just as much as ours.
No, I appreciate that. And as you were saying that, I went through many thoughts, and I'm not gonna go through all of them, but I'm gonna go through this one. It's okay to be wrong because then it gives you an opportunity to be right. I just hope that people don't hold on too tightly to being wrong, that they don't allow themselves to be right. It's very, very easy to be so
Real talk.
convinced and to be in belief of something that we don't give ourselves the opportunity to change that. Referring back to Neil deGrasse Tyson and to others, right? He's not the only one. He's just the face that comes to mind. But oftentimes it's like, believing in aliens, right? It's like, oh, I want to believe, but I don't want to be wrong. What's the matter with being wrong?
Mm.
If you ever get the chance to find out, then you know. And if you don't, well, okay. I don't hold on tightly to being wrong. I hold on tightly to figuring out what's right. Now, if that means I have to be wrong to get there, well, that just so happens to be the vehicle and the vessel for me to get there. That's just what it was. I sometimes can't control that. But I don't hold tightly to it where my pride or my dignity is going to be subdued to whether or not I'm wrong. And I'm hoping other people can learn that because for some strange reason, your sense of well being has been entranced or entrined or put into cuffs over whether or not you're right. When when you come into the world, you're absolutely wrong. You're absolutely wrong. You don't know how to walk, you don't know how to talk. And from that moment on, when you first come into this world, the things that are right, they're consistent. You breathe. If you have trouble, well, you try and figure it out. You sleep. If you have trouble, you try to figure it out. Your heart will beat. If there's trouble, you try to figure it out. But beyond that, everything else is a learning experience. And even within the consistency, there's learning to be had. How you engage it, how you learn from the mistakes. Everything from that point forward is you being wrong. Because I didn't know I was supposed to breathe in through my nose. I didn't know that I was supposed to calm myself down. I didn't know I could calm myself down. I didn't know that I could figure out a way to eat something that would make me feel differently beyond just my appetite. There's so many things you learn as you go. And I'm so sorry that someone has traumatized you that being wrong is a bad thing because it's a great thing. It gives you the opportunity to be right. So, with
And
that,
that's it. That's why people are scared to be wrong, right? Because they someone made them feel bad about being wrong to the point where, right, it's harmful to them. But like you said, it gives you the opportunity to be right. Um, I always like to, come from the approach of, right, if I can have an exchange, right, then it gives me opportunity for all of us to be right, whether I'm being corrected or correcting someone else, right, sharing my perspective or a perspective being shared with me, right. I'm not right just to be right. I'm right so we can all be right. And if someone can share a perspective with me so that I can get right, then I'm all for that.
and aliens are real. So, with that, Affluent, do you have any final thoughts with people for the people? Can they, something for them?
Yeah. Sweat the technique.
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
It's just sweat the technique to the point where you are reflective and looking for the grace and compassion that you navigate the world with. Look for it within yourself, look for it within your community. Be looking for that compassion and sweat the technique because it can get better.
yeah, sweat technique.
One, 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 one.